On Tuesday night, I had the opportunity to see my most anticipated film of 2021, which was of course pushed back to this year, The Batman. I was very excited going into this movie, and I wanted to wait until I knew that more people would have had a chance to see the movie before I made this review. I wasn't really interested in posting a non-spoiler review because I feel that my thoughts are very nuanced and require me to go into spoilers. So this is your final spoiler warning right here. If you have not seen The Batman and do not want to know the details surrounding this movie, click away now and come back once you've had a chance to see the film. I feel that my opinion of this movie is a very middle-of-the-road opinion. There's a lot that I loved about The Batman, but there also was a lot that didn't work for me. With that being said, I want to start with what did work. The Batman himself is portrayed in this film better than, in my opinion, any other Batman movie. In fact, the opening 20 minutes of this film are my favorite opening 20 minutes of any comic book movie. The introduction to the Riddler in the first scene is terrifying and very effective, and what follows is an incredible sequence where we are introduced to Gotham City, the corruption and danger that lies within the city, and we're also introduced to Batman and his current mindset, why he's out doing what he's doing. And that opening shot of the Batman stomping toward his enemies, ready to take them out, is so well crafted and so well done. And what followed throughout this film was not ever a lapse in quality. This is the best shot Batman film ever. It's the best sounding, best looking, most well-crafted Batman movie from a filmmaker's perspective. This is the first film to get so many things right about Batman. The look of the city, Batman's moral code. He does not kill in this film. And in my honest opinion, Pattinson is the greatest live-action iteration of the character. Not only does he not kill, but he fights like Batman. He's not a superhuman. He's a man fighting crime. And the film does a fantastic job of showing us that. The fight sequences aren't overly stylized, they aren't over the top. Pattinson isn't doing things that no human could possibly do, but they're also very fun to watch. The Batmobile chase sequence in this film is my favorite of any Batman movie. More than anything, the Batman really captures the feel of Batman. This felt like a Batman comic book brought to life. Watching this film felt exactly like reading Batman Year One or even The Long Halloween. So at this point of the review, you're probably wondering, so what issues could you possibly have had with it? You're giving this thing a glowing review, and yes, I am. I would venture to call this film a technical marvel, even a masterpiece, and I absolutely understand why people are walking out of this film giving it 10 out of 10s and calling it better than The Dark Knight, but I wouldn't. The only thing that I did not love about The Batman is unfortunately the only thing that I really truly care about when I see a film. The story, and alongside that, the characters that drive the story. Now, I don't want you to think that I hated the story of The Batman. In fact, I think that it is a very good, very compelling story that provides a lot of character development for Batman. I thought that the final message that the film left us on was actually a perfect arc for the Batman character. At the beginning of the film, he is doing what he does for vengeance, and for vengeance alone. By the end of the film, he finds that the Riddler and the men working under Riddler are also acting in vengeance, and he sees what happens when there is only vengeance without justice and without redemption. The film ends with Batman becoming more like the version of Batman that we know from the comics. He is growing into the character that we know and love. This is a coming-of-age story for Batman, like the Spider-Man Homecoming trilogy was for Spider-Man. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do start seeing more discourse on the Batman and whether or not people feel that it was a good adaptation in the years to come. It's true that the Batman does not feature an origin story for the character, at least not in a traditional sense. This film does not show the Waynes getting gunned down. It doesn't show Bruce Wayne donning a cowl for the first time. It doesn't show his first argument with Alfred about being Batman. This Bruce Wayne has already become a vigilante, but instead this is an origin of this vigilante becoming the hero that we know from the comics. And while I think this was an interesting direction to take this film, I don't know that it was necessarily the one I was dying to see. I've never lied about the fact that I've never been a huge fan of Frank Miller's take on Batman. I feel that Batman Year One is a somewhat overrated comic. I feel like Christopher Nolan did a better job adapting Batman's origin in Batman Begins. And to tell you the truth, I'm just more interested in the years where Batman is a bit more established. Again, I thought that the take on Riddler was interesting. I thought that Colin Farrell's Penguin has a lot of potential going forward. I thought Carmine Falcone was played brilliantly by John Turturro. And don't even get me started on Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. All of these actors are fantastic, and their characters have, as I mentioned, a lot of potential. However, just in my personal opinion, I don't feel the screenplay here utilized these characters as well, or allowed the actors to shine in their roles as much as some of Nolan's screenplays did. I didn't feel particularly connected to the dynamic between Bruce and Alfred in this film, and it felt underdeveloped. While I thought that each of the villains was done very well in this film, I didn't feel that any of them had enough screen time to really develop a presence around their villains. The Riddler is an exception, as his presence is felt throughout the film, but even he drops off the map for a good chunk of the movie. The one major exception to this is Jeffrey Wright's Jim Gordon. I think that he stands with Gary Oldman as the best interpretation of the character. I really liked him. I really liked his relationship to the Batman as a buddy cop. I thought that was really cool. I thought that there was some good, funny moments that they were able to do with some dry humor. So that dynamic, needless to say, was definitely a standout. Another character that this film nailed was the corruption of Gotham City itself. I do consider Gotham to be a character itself when it comes to Batman. That is one thing that the Nolan films did not do very well, in my opinion, but this film killed it. Overall, my issues with this story's plot isn't even the plot itself or the destination that this film ends on. I think that it's really satisfying and sets up a really compelling sequel. It's just the journey getting there that I didn't particularly care for. I mentioned that I really liked Colin Farrell's Penguin, but honestly, he could have been written out of the movie. Though Catwoman had more to do than Penguin in the film, likewise I felt that her role could have had a bit more significance. A lot of this film takes place in a nightclub, and this was something that I was talking about on a spoiler discussion stream a few nights ago, and this is a total nitpick, and some people are probably gonna meme on me for not liking it, but I never really care for when films go to nightclubs, and this film spends a lot of time in a nightclub. I just don't like the vibe of nightclubs in general. It's not really my scene. And so I don't really care for it when films go there either. And like I said, a lot of this film takes place in nightclubs. That's all I'll say on the nightclubs, because I know that's a total nitpick and people are gonna meme on me for it, but I just wanted to give my full thoughts on this movie. The tone of this film is similarly very, very dark. There is not a moment to breathe. There is some very dry humor in this film, but it does not provide levity. And while I appreciate that this film really puts us in the mind of Bruce Wayne, who is so focused on his hatred for the corruption of Gotham and so focused on his mission, and the film does a good job of putting us in his mindset for that and showing us his perspective, I also couldn't help but feel like this film could have used a bit more variety in tone and perhaps would have come across as feeling more well-rounded. When it comes to the actual plot points themselves, as I mentioned earlier, I felt that there was quite a bit that could have been written out of this movie and it wouldn't have changed very much. I feel like this same plot could have been built and told in 2 hours as opposed to 3. As a result, I just felt like this movie was a bit unfocused. Comparatively, in The Dark Knight, in my personal opinion, there's not a single character that you could lose or a single scene that you could lose. With this film, however, I felt that the script could have been reworked into something shorter and more focused. There's a lot of elements that are brought up that are just not explored to the extent that they should be. For example, it is revealed that Martha Wayne is an Arkham and that she was mentally ill and institutionalized for a lot of her life. It's revealed that there was some corruption potentially with Thomas Wayne, even though it was unintentional. And I wish that that had been explored to a higher degree. It could have been interesting for Batman to explore the idea of himself being connected to crime or his family being connected to mental illness and wondering if he suffers that to an extent as well. The last thing that I'll bring up is the third act, which has been highly debated. For me personally, I actually really liked it. I thought that it's when the movie really kicked it into gear, and I wish more of the movie was like that. It just felt very out of nowhere. It felt like a different film, and I think that's my main issue with this movie, is it feels like multiple films trying to be a single film. I'll also add that this movie didn't really scratch the itch that was left by the Nolan films, where I just want to see a big action set piece that is very comic booky but accurate to the Batman mythology, like the ones that we see in the Arkham games. I want to see a scene of Batman chasing Man-Bat through the sky. I want to see Mr. Freeze tromping around Gotham. And I don't know that Matt Reeves is the filmmaker that is going to want to explore the more fantastical side of Batman, even though that is very much what I would be interested in seeing with this tone and with this iteration of the character. The Batman is a movie that I feel pretends to take a lot of risks without actually sticking to them, with the exception of the third act. The end of this film leaves Gotham flooded and in dire need of Batman in a no man's land-esque ending, which I really appreciated. Earlier in the film, however, the Riddler sends a bomb to Bruce Wayne. This bomb is activated by Alfred instead, and there's an explosion. It's implied for a moment that Alfred has been killed, but he ends up being okay. He is hospitalized for some of the film, and he ends up okay. And while him being okay provides a beautiful character moment between him and Bruce, it also feels like something that, if they'd stuck to, could have been a higher stake and a higher motivation for Bruce Wayne. Similarly, when it's revealed that there could be some dirt on the Waynes, it's pretty quickly written off as just hearsay and not something that they actually intended to partake in. It could have been more interesting if they'd gone the Telltale route and had the Waynes be more involved in corruption. I'm not saying that I wanted them to be. I'm not saying that I wanted Alfred to die. I'm just saying that I felt that it was an odd choice to imply that such things were about to transpire and then not stick to them. It felt like the movie played it safe, but wanted us to feel that it was taking a lot of risks. Again, this is a personal nitpick. I was on the edge of my seat for the whole film, and I was interested in what was going on. There were just a few times where I felt that the film backtracked on potentially really compelling plot points that we had never seen brought up in previous Bat outings. Overall, The Batman is a technical masterpiece, and I absolutely understand why people are loving it, and I'm glad that people are loving it, and I hope that it does well, because I want more films like this. Even though this particular film had a lot that didn't work for me, it's one that I've thought about more than any other recent comic book movie in memory. I want more comic book movies like this. I'd love to see what Matt Reeves does next in this universe, because chances are I'll like it better. I have no problem with this particular iteration of Batman or the world building around it. This particular adventure just was not for me, but I hope you enjoy it. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of The Batman if you've had a chance to see it yet. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.